So we finished Stardust Crusaders. This is the continuation of the Taigen rewatching and taking Cat for the first time through JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. It's a really good title. You guys are good. It's like a Japanese light novel title. So we finished part 3 a while ago, and I talked about it. I believe I talked about it. Talked about finishing it. No. That was actually, we did that podcast together. Well, we just got around to starting part 4, which Kat was more interested in, just because of the way that I described it to her. She had also told me during like part 2 that she really liked the scenes where the characters were kind of just talking and hanging out. And I said, oh, you're probably going to like part 4. That's a lot of part 4. It feels very, very casual, I guess. Which is funny, I say that because it starts with like the beginning of part 4 is very brutal, which I think a lot of people forget. The beginning of part 4 has some really, like, there's that scene they added at the start of the anime where you get, like, I don't even want to spoil it, but it's like the dramatic kind of pan out thing. The first, like, arc is fucking Angelo, which is like, dude, I forgot that he, like, grabs a dog and, like, bites its face off and then spits the face and the blood back into the owner's open mouth. I forgot that I was like, yeah, this is the fun part. This is like the fun, lighthearted JoJo part. Araki kind of just can't help himself. Also, by the way, that's the last dog that dies in the series. That's the very last one. He stops doing it after part 4. After that, he got it all out of his system, I guess. What a way to go out. And then, he spits the blood and the face into the owner's open mouth, and then has his stand, which was inside of because it's a liquid-based stand, so it was inside the blood, then rip the guy's head off and like into a million pieces from the inside. This is the fun, lighthearted slice of life arc of JoJo. But once you get through that, honestly, it's pretty, the first couple episodes, it's pretty lighthearted. Genuinely. Going back and watching part 4 is a really interesting experience. I was not expecting to have so much to say about JoJo on a rewatch. When I first watched this back in like 2017, I believe it had just finished airing. And I basically went from Stardust Crusaders and then I binged part 4 in like 3 days. And then I went straight on to part 5. And I consumed a lot of the series over the course of like 2 weeks. I think looking back on it now, man, part 4 is really good. Part 4 is really good. It's not just the fact that like it's really different. It's not just the fact that it's like a change of pace. It's that it's executed so well. I haven't read the manga, but I think a lot of things really hit their stride starting with part 4 from both the original like source material standpoint and the anime adaptation. So the biggest thing is that structurally, they totally switched up how they handled the series. So part 1 and 2 were in a combined 24 episode season, with part 2 taking up most of that. Part 3 was in 2 24 episode seasons. So total of 48 episodes for part 3. From part 4 onwards, it has been 39 episode seasons. I believe with like one recap episode that's just a clip show, which isn't included in like any of the, it's like basically in airing only. It's only in the TV broadcast. I don't think anyone ever includes it on streaming or anything, but that's it. That's aside from the recaps, a clean 39 episode season. And you're like, that's a very weird number. That's a very specific number. What is that based on? I don't know, but it works really well for the series. So much so that like they have managed to take at least parts 4 and 5, which have radically different lengths, fit them into 39 episodes, and they both feel really good. It feels like nothing's really I can say for part 5, nothing felt left out. In fact, they added stuff for part 5. Like they took the opportunity to add stuff. That's good. Part 4 is fairly lengthy, but it fits really neatly into 39 episodes. And it's also like that. The biggest problem with part 3 in the anime is that it's too long. It's just too long. The manga might actually be better in that respect, but part 3 really drags out. And that's the one thing that people will tell you is it's long. I appreciated it more on a rewatch, but man, it drags occasionally. It ends very strong. But before that, it's part 4. We finished at the Let's Go Eat Italian because I really wanted to get to that episode at the least. We finished at Let's Go Eat Italian the last time we sat down to watch it. And that's a great episode. And man, there's been like no misses. Even the really, I don't know. Part 4 is interesting from like a shonen manga perspective, a shonen battle manga perspective, because it explicitly powers down the story, but it gets better. Like the stories get better. And for anyone who doesn't know, well, I say explicitly because there's like an interview where Araki literally talked about this. Part 4, I believe, started running around like 1992, something like that. And he was observing the path that... So he had just finished part 3, and the backstory to this is that actually Araki only ever planned for 3 parts. He planned for it to be a trilogy, and it would tell the story of the Joestars versus the Brandos, and it would culminate with them finally, defeating Dio again. For good this time. And then his editor was like, can you do like one more? And he was like, sure. Okay, I'll do like one more. And he came up with part 4. And part 4 is great because when you look at it from that perspective, it really does feel like he's in his retirement. Like he was planning on just retiring the series. Like he got all the serious business out of the way. And now part 4, he can kind of just relax and doesn't have to worry about pushing things too hard. And there's this very like playful, kind of light and loose attitude to the writing of part 4 that is really endearing to me on a rewatch. Part 3 is very serious. We got to go here. We got to save Jotara's mom. We got to defeat Dio. And that's every episode. It's this really serious action thing. Same with part 2 for the most part. Even though Joseph's a very fun, like, freewheeling protagonist, it is like, okay, well, he's going to die if he doesn't defeat the Pillar Men, by this date. So there is like a seriousness to it. Part 4 has there is a long-term goal, but it's just kind of like most episodes are just someone gets superpowers that probably shouldn't, and then they kind of act selfishly with them. That's like most episodes. Araki saw what was going on with Dragon Ball and other similar shonen, and even though those were so successful, he had honestly a pretty commendable level of foresight. And he was like, I don't know where Dragon Ball was in its arc at that point. That would have been on Z, And he was like, so is he just going to like keep making stronger and stronger guys for Goku to fight? That feels like it would get really hard after a bit. Because Araki has said in the past that he has trouble with sort of like not planning the nitty gritty details out. And he has literally said that he writes himself into a corner where he genuinely like doesn't know how the characters are going to get out of something. And I think that that's kind of fun because he actually puts pressure on himself to come up with something, and that makes the solutions the characters come up with feel really ingenious. He rarely, if ever, goes for like total ass pulls, right? That almost never happens in the series. So I'm sure that he was maybe kind of aware of his tendency to do that, and then saw like, fuck, do I have to make a guy who's stronger than Dio? and he decided to go in the exact opposite direction. And he doesn't even have the idea for Kira. He doesn't even have the idea for the main villain of the part until like halfway through. Like, he's really just goofing off and having fun. So he was like, well, what if I take the exact opposite approach and I make part 4 really low powered? And there are some like pretty strong stand. Like Okuyasu, it's like this infamous meme, right? Okuyasu's stand, the hand, is absurdly powerful. He can just erase space and like it seals up where he erased it, right? It like, connects back together. What's the word? It like the space around it it creates like essentially a vacuum, and he can do it with like that, like anything. Insanely powerful stand, but he's like a dummy, the goofy dumbass, right? So he's not like that dangerous, or he's not. If it was a villain, if he was like Vanilla Ice, it would be scary. But he's like kind of a goofball, and he's only really scary because of the influence he gets from his older brother. But other than that, he just kind of like, honestly, he doesn't even use the hand that much. He doesn't like, it's a violent stand, and he's not a very inherently violent guy, which is sort of funny. Maybe there's some symbolism with like filling in the gaps or something, like where something was missing. I don't know. I mean, when Koichi first gets his stand, it's like, it's not even a combat stand. One of the earliest arcs is a guy who gets the ability to make people feel their guilt physically as like a physical weight. And he uses it to do like ambulance chaser scams to like guilt people into giving him money because it becomes physically unbearable. And there's like a lot of stuff in the part that's like that. There's enemies and they can get into like life-threatening situations. The fucking Yukako arc is crazy. But it's just it's really fun. That's like the main word for part 4, is a lot of it is just really fun. And it helps a lot that the anime tackles it by using mainly one episode each. There's a couple there's like a 3-parter. There's like the Nijimura Brothers part 3, which Kat noticed. And before that, it was like, I think the only arc that went that long was Dio. And that's mainly, they do 3 parts for the Nijimura Brothers, mainly just because, like, I don't know, but it doesn't feel like it's taking that long. It feels like the story it doesn't feel like it's padding out because they had to hit a certain episode count. It feels like it had to take that long to set up that early part of the story. And then it's just like, one off, 2-parter, one off. That's a lot of them. The story is moving along at a very brisk clip. Occasionally, part 3 could feel like a bit of a slog. Some of the episodes just felt like, man, these characters' internal monologues are going on a fucking while. It's a little much. Part 4 has been very breezy. Very breezy. I forgot about how intense like the very start of it was. Man, there's so much random stuff to talk about. I laughed a little bit during the scene. I call it the media literacy scene. Which is from like episode 2 or something. I know media literacy has become a little bit of like, it's a little overused to just, whenever someone disagrees with me about something. But JoJo fans can be a special breed, and their obstinacy in even trying to read into like anything at all beyond the surface level is impressive. It's the scene where, kind of spoilers for part 4, I guess skip to whatever the next segment is when Jotaro is... It's after Angelo has killed Josuke's grandfather, who's only been in the story for like 1 episode. So he's not... You feel bad. It's important to Josuke. It's not super important to the viewer, but it's a big moment for Josuke because he's like 14, He's lived his life pretty I would say, he hasn't been in something of this magnitude. Is his fucking grandfather just got killed by a guy who was trying to kill Josuke. So there's a lot going on, and he's not super emotionally mature, and he is used to, he has his stand Crazy Diamond. It's inherently, I love the symbolism of it in that it's a very giving stand, specifically giving, because Josuke, he can revert things that are broken or things that are, anything that's been broken by his stand, or just in general, he can revert to a previous state, but he can change the form that it takes when it's fixed back. Which is like a metaphor for how a lot of part 4 is. A lot of fights in part 4 are the main character beats someone up. It's usually Josuke beats someone up and then they kind of chill out. It's kind of like this inheritance from Jonathan. One of Jonathan's, I'd say, like traits was his ability to change people's hearts by being so good and being so inspiring to other people. He's like this shining light of justice and nobility and love. And Josuke inherits that, like that's in the Joestar blood. That's what he gets kind of out of his heritage. And thus Crazy Diamond is a stand that breaks things and then fixes them in a way that Josuke, chooses, or the way that he can fix it to make it better or something like that. But notably, he can't use it on himself. So he can heal other people's injuries, but not his own. So it's an inherently giving stand. Even though Josuke might act like a punk, he has so much love to give. And even if he kind of shows it in maybe a rough way, occasionally, he's always well-intentioned, and he's always trying to help people. And he has like a real sense of justice, and another very common like JoJo trait is disdain for people who pick on those weaker than them. That's I'd say that's inherently a Jonathan thing. It's kind of it's not really a Joseph thing. It's a Jotaro thing a little bit. It's a Josuke thing. It's very much a Giorno thing. That's like Giorno's entire motivation. That's like a recurring element, and that's like symbolized in a pretty cool way through Crazy Diamond. And he's like trying to, I was talking about his grandpa. He's trying to heal his grandpa's injuries, and he's just dead. The guy's just dead, and he can heal a body, but he can't bring the soul back. And Josuke is in denial. He's in the first stage of grief. He thinks he can still do something about it. And he's just furiously using his stand on his grandfather and trying to heal him back. And Jotaro is just standing there. And I really like Jotaro, not as I think Jotaro is a fine protagonist. I think he probably played very well in like that, Fist of the North Star era, where that kind of a big tough guy protagonist was really really in, that was sort of the style of the time. But I really appreciate how Araki builds on his character and realistically matures him. Araki has a real knack. You don't see a ton of characters who are like, repeat across parts, but when he does show you how a character, who's 10 years older, behaves, he is really good at it. Jotaro's just standing there, and he's kind of letting Josuke go through it a little bit, and then he tells him, Josuke, once the soul is gone, you can't do anything about it. It's just there is no stand that can bring back the dead. And eventually Josuke just has to accept it. And it's a good scene. It develops Josuke's character. It shows him that stuff's getting real and there's consequences for this, and it's not just fun and games. It's a bit of a growing up moment for him. And it also shows how Jotaro has grown up. Part 3 Jotaro would have never said something like that. He would have told Josuke to like shut the fuck up and like stop crying or something like that. But he has he has this like tenderness, that, just a little bit. He's still like a big, tall, quiet guy, but he's a little more worldly, and he's experienced enough, and it feels like he's kind of gotten over some of his personal, like trouble with his emotions, and he can actually do something that's a kind moment for Jotaro. Jotaro would act kind. He would do things that in part 3 that were kind. I mean, he cares about I think like there's the scene at the very start where he knows that something's wrong with his mom because she doesn't tell him, she doesn't send him off at the door and say like, I love you, have a good day. And he knows immediately that something's off, right? He obviously cares. He just has trouble showing it. And he's kind of emotionally stunted, probably because like he grew up without a dad, and he has a bit of like a smothering mom, and he probably feels a little weird. This is just my interpretation of his character. Maybe he feels a little weird because he's like mixed, and he's like a high schooler in Japan. Like maybe he's got some identity stuff. He has an interest in science. Like I think at the very start in the first episode of part 3, they say he wants to become a marine biologist, which he does in later on. And he just doesn't have like a big support network. He probably feels like a bit of an outsider. He's also just like a fucking teenager, He's having like an identity crisis, and it's sort of, I think it's part of it is manifesting in him he's really having trouble showing his emotions. Also, he is super into, much like Araki, a lot of Western, oh my God, I just want to talk about Jotaro for a second. He's really into like 80s action movies. And there's this really particular depiction of like men in 80s action movies that's become pretty infamous through like so many parodies, right? And it's like, oh, because Araki's a huge fan of like Dirty Harry and I guess The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is an Italian film, but that kind of why can't I remember his name? It's one of those things where it's whoa, that is not what I wanted to look up. Fucking actor? Who's he based on? Oh my God. I'm just gonna look up Dirty Harry. Clint Eastwood. Araki's a big fan of Clint Eastwood and movies and that ilk. And he said before in interviews that that kind of character and that kind of like American action hero informed his own idea of what a hero is. Like the 70s and 80s action hero, which I know the 70s and 80s are pretty different decades in terms of American cinema, but there is a through line of a certain kind of hero and a certain kind of, I think, specifically masculinity, which is important when you're looking at Jotaro, because Jotaro doesn't have a dad. And it's like, okay, oh my God, I love how the end of part 3 is so funny, because there's this fucking insane like 4-episode battle with Dio. It's like the most down to the wire, hardest fight in the entire series. Jotaro finally, like, he unlocks this fucking hidden power to at the very end and like uses it to beat Dio, fucking obliterates him. And then he's standing there and he goes, Dio, you lost for one reason and one reason only. It's because you pissed me off, dude. You really made me, oh, I was so mad back there. And it's like, it's not, I love that it's a bad line. You lost because there's such a build up to it. And then it's just, you really pissed me off, dude. And then you remember that he's like 17 and he doesn't have a dad. And he's grown up on these like Clint Eastwood action movies. And he's just trying to be cool. He's trying to be a cool grown up. And this is his idea of what a cool grown up heroic man is like. He's got to have some kind of a one-liner, you know? He has all these stupid fucking one-liners, like during the Steely Dan fight, when he fucking punches him through a building, and then he like takes out a piece of paper he'd been writing on, and he goes, "Here's your check." He's like, "You're welcome for the knuckle sandwich. Here's your check." It's so he's so stupid. It's so dumb. And that's like what he's trying to do. He's like grasping at straws for how to grow up and find his way in the world. And you look at him in part 3, and then you see just this one scene in part 4, and it tells you so much about how he's grown, that he can even like, again, because he can do things that care about other people, right? And he looks out for, and he cares about his friends a lot. He's got it inside, and he can act on it. He often acts on it like through violence, but to like verbalize it is very different. It's a very different thing to like do something nice for someone versus saying something very kind to them. Those are different things, and some people struggle with one or the other. And it's a really revealing moment, I think, for him. And then the one thing that everyone focuses on this scene is Jotaro, a stand literally can bring people back to life. Like, you literally did that for your grandfather at the end of part 3 when you started his heart again. And like, yeah, it's kind of funny to talk about. There's also like Limp Bizkit, which kind of basically does that in part 6. It is kind of funny to talk about, like, haha, yeah, right? But there are like genuinely people who think that that's like a problem, and like, did Araki forget about that? And it's like, okay, think about it. Think about the scene. Jotaro has just stumbled into Josuke's life, a pro of nothing, right? He's been there like a few days, rocked his world, told him like who his real dad is and all that. And now also there's like a serial killer, and he feels a little complacent in roping him into this thing. And suddenly there's real consequences, and Josuke has lost his beloved grandfather, who, mind you, I'm sure Jotaro would have loved to have a grandfather growing up around him. I'm sure he would have loved to have Joseph around. Or something like that, right? Or whoever Holly's dad was, I don't know. Like, I'm sure he would have really appreciated that. But Josuke's had taken this severe blow. Like, this is a really traumatic event for a 14-year-old, right? And all he wants is he just wants Josuke to like accept what's happened and maybe like feel a little better. He's just trying to comfort his, well, oh God, technically uncle. But they have, that's kind of the joke, right? Is technically Josuke is Jotaro's uncle despite being 10 years younger. But Jotaro really, it's like the reverse. The roles are reversed. Jotaro is effectively like the uncle here. He's basically trying to comfort his nephew after a horrible traumatic event, and they're literally looking at the corpse. That's why he tells them that. Maybe he could even be thinking, besides the time that I literally started my dad's heart again, or my grandfather's heart again. But for the moment, Josuke like needs to hear this. This is something that like emotionally he has to hear. And that's like the purpose of that line. It's not like a plot hole. It's not that Jotaro just forgot about what happened. Araki had literally just written part 3. His memory isn't that bad. Yeah, I like that scene a lot. I really appreciate Jotaro as, I think he's fine as a protagonist, but I really like him as a whole. I like Jotaro a lot, but it's hard to explain it if you've only seen part 3. And it was hard to explain it to Kat while we were watching part 3, because she was like not super hot on Jotaro. But I really like him in part 4. You get a little bit of him in part 5, like a little bit. And then in part 6 as well, I think is like, it's a really satisfying character arc. And that you see him going from 17 to like 40. And I think that the subtlety of Araki's writing is really undervalued by a lot of fans. It's sort of frustrating. This used to be a bigger problem, I think, with people who only consume the series through memes, or not even that, but like they do watch it, but they don't really like think about it. There's a lot of people who watch JoJo and they only like, okay, it's this funny, zany series that's like crazy and wacky, and that's all true. But there's like real substance underneath, and there's like real stuff going on, and character arcs. And I think Araki's writing is really interesting. I have come to really appreciate what I think of now being like all caught up on part 9. I reread part 8 before part 9 came out. And I've kind of seen, I feel like I have a much better understanding of the grand arc that JoJo is, that it's like, yeah, it's all these smaller parts, which themselves have their own little story arcs within. But really, it all forms one long arc, this one big artistic expression that develops and it changes over the years as Araki himself changes as a person. And there's a lot of really intriguing things and like themes to discuss. That's why I'm really interested to get to like part 6 and actually like finish watching it. I had read the manga. I never finished the anime. Because I think part 6 has stuff that flew way over my head. I did not understand really like Poochie's, I'd say, ideological motivation in part 6 for a very long, maybe even an embarrassingly long amount of time. But looking at it now, I think I also just sort of failed to really think that hard about it. Partially because I didn't have like a ton. I was sort of racing through the series. There's this thing that happens where you go like, oh, I want to get to the next part though, and then you kind of like speed through the end of a part. And it's a shame. And reading back through part 8 made me like it a lot more. It bumped it up to like my 3rd favorite part, flaws and all. But I really like part 8 on reread. But there's these people who like, I don't know. There's a lot of people who really have no idea that JoJo is anything beyond memes. And it's a little frustrating because, like, occasionally you'll meet someone who, you know, watches JoJo or is into it, and you're like, oh, cool. And you get to talk about it a little bit, and you get through, like, the surface level, like, what's your favorite part? Who's your favorite JoJo? Have you read the manga? Are you caught up? Or, you know, like that stuff. And it's like, I do think it's like really fascinating to talk about like all the stuff you learn about Dio in part 6 and all the stuff with fate and understanding destiny and stuff changing. And then you get to like the fucking corpse universe after like part 7. And there's like the flow of energy and stuff. And it gets like, there's, someone was, oh my God, like the most recent chapter of part 9, someone in like the Reddit thread, like the discussion thread about it, was like, oh, here's this fucking crazy book that Araki has absolutely been reading because he's like directly referencing concepts in it. And I forget what it's called. It's called, oh my God. It had some wacky title. I don't remember, but it's this like, I was reading like the Wikipedia article for it, and it was like, yeah, this was written as a philosophical work or something. It's like, it started as like a scientific thing and it's shifted into like a philosophical text because it went like, it goes so off the rails into craziness. I'm gonna actually literally I'm gonna pause and I'm gonna go look up what that book was called. Okay, I found it. It's called Anti-Oedipus: Capitalism and Schizophrenia. A 1972 book by French authors, the French, Guy Deleuze and Félix Guattari. I'm not going to give them I will not give the French the dignity of me pronouncing their names right. The former a philosopher and the latter a psychoanalyst. It is the first volume of their collaborative work, Capitalism and Schizophrenia, the second being 1,000 Plateaus from 1980, 8 years later. Okay, cool. In the book, Deleuze and Guattari developed the concepts and theories in schizoanalysis, a loose critical practice initiated from the standpoint of schizophrenia and psychosis, as well as from the social progress that capitalism has spurred. They refer to psychoanalysis, economics, the creative arts, literature, anthropology, and history in engagement with these concepts. Contrary to contemporary French uses of the ideas of Sigmund Freud, they outlined a, quote, materialist psychiatry modeled on the unconscious, regarded as an aggregate of productive processes of desire, incorporating their concept of desiring production, which interrelates desiring mechanisms and bodies without organs, and repurpose Karl Marx's historical materialism to detail their different organizations of social production, recording surfaces, coding, territorialization, and the act of inscription. That was one sentence. Yeah. So that's like what the main character of Part 9's like worldview is based off of. like he's writing about some shit. And a lot of people just want to talk about the memes. They just want to talk about the memes. I just want to say there's more to life than memes. But anyway, part 4 is great. I'm really enjoying it so far. It's going by very quickly. It's been a real breeze